Rumor no more. NASCAR is in the midst of a car shortage. Today we learned that NASCAR's Daytona 500 winning car, for the first time in a very long time, will not be displayed at Daytona, as it needs to go and race later on in the season. NASCAR may be one big wreck away from a crisis. Let's talk about it. So, things have changed quite a bit since we last spoke about car counts and NASCAR. Ironically enough, despite the fact that there is indeed a car shortage, in some ways because of the supply chain issues that are affecting our post-pandemic and lockdown world. Now, the 36 charter teams, you guys should all know at this point. We don't need to go over them. But it appears that the Daytona 500 is headed for a 42-car entry list. Many of these drivers you're already well aware. Beard Oil, Noah Gragson. MBM is expanding to 2 cars for the Daytona 500 for Timmy Hill and JJ Yaley. The money team is real, and Kaz Gralla is the driver. You heard about that here first. Jacques Villeneuve will drive the Hazeberg number 27. Of course, he's the 1997 World Driving Champion, 1995 Kart Champion, and 1995 Indianapolis 500 winner. And while not yet confirmed, New York Racing, or NY Racing, however you want to say it, appears to be headed for an entry with Greg Biffle, of all people. So, 42 cars sets up quite a dilemma. That means that the duels matter. And I don't know if you guys have noticed this or not, but the Daytona 500 and really speed weeks, especially in recent years, has been an absolute demolition derby. When you got cars racing to be in the race, that really amps things up. And to the point, things have been amped up that NASCAR has decreed that for the first time in my memory, NASCAR will not impound the Daytona 500 winning car for the entire year. Traditionally, it goes in what was formerly known as Daytona USA, which is now known as the Motorsports Hall of Fame of America. NASCAR will give the winning car back to the winning team as soon as the car has been scanned, and then they will take a show car and put a show car on display as an exact replica. But the real car will be pushed back into service. This is very much, I would say, cause for concern. And we're going to see over the next few weeks, and especially at Daytona, because let's put it this way. Daytona is going to be a reckoning. And I've already stated the obvious. It's going to be a demolition derby. Unless they just absolutely, if there's some sort of gentleman's agreement that everybody's just going to play nice, which I don't see happening. It's the biggest race of the year, and now you have a bunch of small teams in there that are trying to get in the biggest race of the year. So if you think about it, if you have a crash, and most teams, believe it or not, are on one backup car. So, for example, Stewart-Haas Racing has a single backup car. They've already crashed a car at the Clash. So, if there's a big crash in the Daytona 500, or God forbid, the duels, and 2 Stewart-Haas cars are completely written off, what the heck are they going to do? Well, there's a couple of things I see here. Number one, the reason there are all these smaller teams that have gotten a hold of cars and are entering them in the Daytona 500 is specifically because they see an opportunity, because either they had one car available to them or they had, in Carl Long's case, a few. If you enter cars and you putt around at the back of a duel and there's a big crash and all of a sudden a big team needs your car, you can sell that car at a massive profit or lease it at a massive profit. You can take your prize money. You can take your extra money from Stewart-Haas Racing, let's say, for example, and go home fat, dumb, and happy. It's interesting. It's very interesting. But at the same time, even if this doesn't rear its head in the duels, the Daytona 500 is almost certainly going to be a crash fest. Or at least there's going to be, traditionally, we look at the race last year. There are two big wrecks. There was the one at the beginning of the race, lap 13, where you had a bunch of cars get taken out. And then there was the really big pileup, at least in terms of hits and in terms of cars getting written off, which was at the end of the race. So if this car races similarly to the Gen 6 car, and we're, again, not really going to know that, possibly not even into the duels. If they're wrecking as big as they were in the Gen 6 era, possibly bigger, you've got to consider that if there's cars getting written off at Daytona, and if there's a significant amount of cars getting written off at Daytona, what happens when they go to the second race of the season, the third race of the season? What happens when they get to Atlanta, which is going to be like a plate race, where they're going to tear up a lot of stuff? And then Talladega, that's further on in the year, almost to May. There's some question marks, I think, some serious question marks here. And the fact that a lot of the kind of established NASCAR media has finally started talking about this, I think is indicative of how far or how much of a concern this is going to be. Because with the supply chain issues, with the parts shortages, with the propensity to have big crashes at Daytona, and the fact that there are all these concerns going in about how the car is going to crash, XYZ, and the fact that there are so many changes have had to be made based on those crash tests last year, man, this is going to be touch and go. And I've seen people, or I have seen people, easy for me to say, bring up 2013 and the new, the first time the Gen 6 cars debuted. But I will say this, the Gen 6 cars were based on the COT chassis. So there was a lot of parts out there. And also the teams were fabricating their own stuff at that point. Now you've got mandated suppliers. And the suppliers have to now supply all of those parts to 42 different teams. And if the current trends are what they are at Daytona, and you wreck 20 cars, possibly writing off, let's say, 5. Even the extra cars at the Daytona 500 won't necessarily cover all of those cars that were totaled, especially if a team, say, totals 2 cars and only has 1 backup car. Oh boy, this could be one of those deals, and I certainly think it's one of the biggest stories in the NASCAR Cup Series season, and it'll be very interesting to see it play out. How do you think it's going to play out? I certainly think it's going to go one of 2 ways at the end of the day. Speed Weeks is either going to be extremely boring and tepid, and everybody's going to take it real easy until maybe the last 10 laps, or it's going to be one of those years where everybody's just going to crash constantly and we're going to write some stuff off. I think finally, my final point is that you look at the crashes in the Coliseum at 60 miles an hour, and you look at the damage done to those cars. And I know this is a new way of stock car racing. These cars are designed to break apart like Indy cars when they crash. But the destruction the carnage that we could potentially see at Daytona, debris, that's something that we see a lot in Indy cars, is when there's a big crash, there are other cars that get involved that had the wreck completely avoided because there's debris all over the place, cut tires, what have you. And you now also have the reliability issues that popped up at the clash. So it's going to be a total race of attrition, one way or another, whether you're writing cars off or not. So as we head into the Daytona 500, things are changing, and things are going to be very, very different because of those changes. So thank you guys so much for watching this. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I'm sure it'll be a great discussion, and we'll see you in the next video.